I'm gonna try. Um, okay, just a second. I want to see how. Okay, Hannah. I think. God, I don't know. Okay, well, anyway, we could always share it later.
Yep.
It'll just get a lot more traction if it's live on Facebook, but I can't remember how to do it. Oh, live on Facebook. There's a link.
There's a link. There you go. It's just that easy.
um, we want. I hope that's right. Sorry. Excellent. Okay, I'm just going live. So, and I'm going to allow people to come in here. So, got it. It's being recorded and it's being broadcasted live. Okay.
There we go.
Let's just make sure it's on my right page.
Oh yeah, it could just be on your private page.
Yeah, it is. People to come in here. So, got it. It's being recorded and it's being broadcasted live. Okay.
There we go.
Let's just make sure it's on my right page. It is not on the right page. So,
The good thing is that we're just tech wizards.
right? How do I get on my right page? Oh, switch account. Yes, please.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Okay. Now, let's try this again. Sorry. Oh, gosh. Ah, got it. Wait. Ah, I got it. Here we go.
There we go. Live on Facebook.
Recording.
We are rolling.
And I am going to. Do you need access? Do you want to be a co-host, or are you okay?
I'm not bothered. I mean, the only thing I would have to share, the only reason would be the thing I just put in the chat there, the recovering how to order it. But you can do that as well.
Great. Um, Welcome everybody.
There we go. Aisha, Shira, Colleen, John, Ari.
Welcome.
Hi
Hello.
guys.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
Welcome to the Beatitudes Bash. It's a party.
It sounds like hitting people with the Beatitudes,
Yes.
which I'm for. I think that's what this is about.
In the spirit of nonviolence, we
Yeah.
say bash everyone with the Beatitudes.
That's it.
Nice.
That's amazing.
I should mute because we've got roosters here.
Ah, yes. The same roosters that woke me up of a morning.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
The silkies.
The silkies, yeah.
If
I
only
hardly heard the
roosters had the
roosters.
mute button, right?
I haven't muted at me just because I thought I'd gift everyone with a few more rooster calls before I did. But I'll mute now.
There's Mark and Olivia Van Bommel. Good to see you. Oh, Marlene. Denise. Okay. I think we're just waiting for one or two more folks to jump in.
These are exciting days, these 9 days of just an emphasis on Beatitudes, but also, Aaron, you and I have talked about this before, sort of the re-emphasis on the core teachings of Jesus and even the person of Jesus is such an incredible season that we're in. Such an incredible time.
Yeah, no, it's so important. I was just in England teaching a class on prophetic stuff, social and charismatic prophetic stuff. And after, I think the third class, someone said, I don't understand how what you're teaching has to do with the course title, which was about prophetic practices. And I said, oh, because I'm just teaching you about Jesus. Because if you're not connected to Jesus, really deeply connected to Jesus, then I don't want to give you any skills around the prophetic or evangelism or anything really, because if you don't have love, then what's the point of this? So I just love that it's getting back to the very core teachings of Jesus and the person of Jesus, as you say.
Yeah, I love that because I think everything's in danger of this. Like in the end, it really becomes about power, a conversation about power. And of course, that's what we see being used so terribly by the church, by structures, by the historical church. Like in Canada, we're trying to figure out how to respond to the residential school kids' bodies being discovered, and what is the church's response to that. It's so easy for us to get defensive and fearful and sort of like play the victim, and at the same time, this is real history. These are real bodies being found. Like this is a real thing that the church did in the name of Jesus. And then, of course, men abusing their power in church leadership, most recently all across the states. There's been all these exposés, sort of what I call an uncovering time of just plain power being misused in the name of Jesus. And this is good news for me, that I think people are really tiring of people of God who say that they're doing things for God, that don't look like Jesus, that don't smell like Jesus, that don't act like Jesus, and that don't bear the fruit of Jesus. So for me, this kind of resurgence, I think we either completely deconstruct and like there's nothing, like we literally are all hanging on this, like, well, they're not us and we're not them. And like, like all this sort of like, how do we present ourselves to the Lord, to each other, to the world? Or we rediscover the essence of our faith and our practice in not just like in some new, fresh way, but like the most ancient way to place Jesus at the center again.
Yeah.
And to say, this is the way. And we confess that whenever we don't do this, whenever Jesus isn't the point and Jesus isn't the one leading us and Jesus's spirit is not filling us and moving us, we get it wrong, really wrong. And it struck me because you were talking about, you were using the word prophetic. So if anyone's watching this later and don't really understand what that means, it's just, the ministry of the prophetic is the voice of God, and listening for the voice of God in everyday life for one another, but also for the world too. Like the prophets of the Old Testament would demonstrate and talk and speak to power, truth to power in many ways. And also people can actually get like a beautiful word of God that can liberate them or encourage them, or even today. But when you're talking about gifts like the prophetic, again, it can be such a powerful gift. And if that power isn't rooted in the person of Jesus, it can easily just slip into patterns of control or manipulation, or abuse, really. So this idea of being rooted in the person of Jesus this is what the Beatitudes Bash is all about. Is like,
Totally.
how do we do this in a way that's faithful and in a way that will actually, I think, help all of us rediscover the good news and the goodness of God, and to present that to the world, to show the world that Jesus is awesome, relevant and good, and there's so much for us to learn.
Yeah. Just a quick note, if people are not on mute, if you could turn yourself on mute, because it says go to everybody. There we go. And yeah, I know, I totally agree, Danielle. And I mean, a lot of people in this time are using words like apocalyptic, and because of the way that word has been used, we think it means the end of the world. And so when you say, well, it's the apocalypse, it's the end of the church, it's the end of the world, it's the end of all these things. But actually the word apocalypse just means unveiling. That's literally what it means. And so when John the Revelator is writing the apocalypse, revelation, it literally means seeing behind the veil, seeing these truths that have been covered up for a long time. And that can be the truths of structures, the truths of power, the truths of these things, but it's also the truth of Jesus, who Jesus really is, that has been covered up by various things. So I think we should long for apocalyptic times where Jesus is truly unveiled, and where the works of evil, the works of darkness, have a light shone on them, and it's not comfortable. This is, as I've been working in recovery circles for the last 25 years, it requires light being shone on things that you don't want to look at in your life, or that you don't want to look at in your family relationships, or you don't want to look at in your neighborhood. But it's healing to have that light shone on, and it's healing to invite Jesus and to be invited by Jesus into these places of deliverance, which is ultimately what the prophetic is, into places of deliverance, both personally and socially. But it is uncomfortable. So when we talk about the Beatitudes, we're going to be talking about uncomfortable things, but and it's good. It's good actually to be in that place of discomfort from which new things can be born.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for us to grasp, that the Beatitudes and really all the teachings of Jesus are not these just sentimental kind of they are parables, but not fables, not just nice little poignant teachings that help us generally get through life. They are actually words that call us out of chaos and into goodness, out of our addictions and into freedom and deliverance, out of enslavement and into liberty. And so that's an uncomfortable thing. And so when we really encounter these Beatitudes, as we've talked about, you and I, Danielle, it's deeply uncomfortable, but also taking us into wide open spaces, which are actually really good.
And it's in so many ways. I wondered if I could show a little promo video here, just of a podcast season I did called The Right Side Up. And this podcast season is, and then we'll move into your book, Aaron. I feel like we've been circling, then we'll go the creative way down, and then infinitum. So like, I feel like you and I have spent like the last many years of our lives just like on the Beatitudes. And I can't get out of it. Like I keep trying to get out of it. I'm like, surely there's more, but, and there's always more, but I just feel like there is something right now about the season in which we're living, where people are looking, just like you said, it's apocalyptic, it's the exposing, and it's really bad news and terrifying, and it's really good news and awesome at the same time, because it's terrifying and letting go of who we really are. And we'll talk more about that work of recovery, right? Which is, the great work of recovery, the reason it works so well. And you wrote this beautiful book that helped me understand this, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But just this uncovering to get to the truth, right? It's a truth that liberates us. It's a truth that sets us free. And even discovering the truth about ourselves. So we'll get to that. Is this cool if we just do like a little, this isn't on the list, but I just felt like it's this upside down. It's free, by the way. This is like a little mini course. It's become a little mini course, and it's free for anybody online. If this is helpful to anybody, it's just sort of like a starter on the Beatitudes. And what happened was I teamed up with World Vision, because what I realized is that I've learned the most about Jesus through people on the margins. And this was a great discovery. I mean, Aaron and I both, even in the downtown east side, probably my early posture was, I'm going to go take Jesus to the downtown east side, and then was shocked to discover Jesus was already there, and was thrilled to have me come, because he wanted to introduce me to his friends and teach me the ways of the kingdom. And so for me, it was just like, literally, it became upside down. It became one of the greatest means by which I've found God in so many ways, and found people who knew God in ways that I could never know, and or at least that I had not known yet. And the reason why is because of the Beatitudes, because blessed are those who mourn, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, blessed are those who hunger and thirst, blessed are those, so just they had touched a sacredness that I had not touched yet. And so they were my teachers. And also, this is true around the world. And so it dawned on me, it's so funny that the dominant sort of Christian culture goes to these like people like me and many of my friends who have these kind of like large platforms, and they go to them to ask like, how do we live and stuff like that. And they're great, they're amazing people, there's nothing wrong with them, and they have beautiful things to offer. But I was thinking, isn't it ironic, because the places where I've learned the most about Jesus, where Jesus has been most revealed, is always on the margins. And so I teamed up with World Vision to say, what if we could right side up a podcast series where we get sort of famous, large platform Christians to actually start asking the questions of the people who know best the path of the Beatitudes. And so, there's a couple of really stunning, there's a guy named Christos who works, he's a priest with AIDS. He developed AIDS early on as a priest and has this encounter with this incredible painting in a cathedral. He was just like, what on earth? What is going on in the midst of the AIDS crisis in Africa? And then he sees this painting of Jesus with AIDS. It's this painting of Jesus with AIDS, and it's got the Beatitudes written over in the Xhosa language of South Africa. And he has this encounter in the cathedral where Jesus says to him, like, now you can enter. Like, you can enter now. And then he ends up entering into the suffering of Jesus through having AIDS. But because he has AIDS, he starts training church communities and then Muslim communities in how to reach out to vulnerable people and people suffering with AIDS and children. And like, he's reached hundreds of thousands of people, training them and sort of welcoming, because he was able to enter into the way of Jesus. So he's incredible. Like, I mean, just talking to him is such an honor. And then there's a guy, Victor, who grew up in India, and he has several disabilities, cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy.
Yes, thank you. And so he's interviewed by the president of World Vision, who's asking him like about purity of heart. And his interview, literally, Aaron, I just like cried my face off. He finishes his interview with a song he can only has one hand and a keyboard in the middle. It's filmed on a phone in India at the home that he's in. And he just sings about how, like, you could have the whole world, but give me Jesus. You can have everything else, just give me Jesus. And it's just, So anyway, we did it as a podcast, but then we captured these videos, so that we made it into a course, because I really want people to learn at the feet of people who know what it's like to encounter Jesus in those places where I feel like sometimes in Western cultures, it's harder for us to get there. We have so many, disguises and facades and self-sufficiency and like strengths in terms of like the stuff around us. And that's why recovery becomes such a gift, right? When we get to the end of ourselves. But let me just play this. Let me play this promo just so people have an idea. And if you're watching this later and you want just a little touch of this, or you want to, this is totally free. You can get there on my website, DanielleStrickland.com, and it's like, I think it's under resources. Let me do this and you can have a look. We spend a lot of time and energy and money on finding experts to help us navigate our lives. And we have been taught from the very earliest of ages that upward mobility is a measure of our success. That's where we're all aiming. And then we run right smack dab into the middle of Jesus's manifesto, into the person of Christ, who tells us something else, who turns the world upside down, or maybe he's turned it right side up. Who are really blessed in a kingdom sense are those who have suffered, those who have mourned, those who are poor in spirit, who've gotten to the end of their own rope, those who are insulted and persecuted, those who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness and for justice in the here and right now.
to learn from the kingdom experts, to take a page out of the page of Jesus Christ.
Beautiful. I smiled there at the end seeing Tanis's name on the list of kingdom teachers, and Jakram. So a couple of I just love that I know some of the kingdom teachers. That's what excites me is, and it's part of why we wanted to do this Beatitude Bash. The way we're going to do it is there are some of us who have platforms, and that's fine. That's sort of inevitable. Some people are going to get known, but there's so many people who know so much about Jesus who don't often get a platform in that way. And there's actually I remember we've talked about that there's a danger in people constantly looking to you for wisdom, when actually wisdom is dispersed. That what we see in the gifts of the Holy Spirit even are that it falls on all people. There's this beautiful passage in Acts taken from Joel, which is that the spirit of prophecy, the Spirit of God, is going to fall on all people, old and young, men, women, slaves and free. And I just sometimes we still go, oh no, we want to locate it only in that one person, that one leader, that one speaker. And we say, no, actually, I've learned so much from my dear friends. So I'm still actually waiting on a friend of mine to come in. He's in a broken down RV currently and trying to find internet. So he's going to talk about, I want to interview him about my book, and he has some real expertise about that. So maybe we'll wait for a little bit later to talk about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's great. As you were talking even about the way of Jesus and leadership and like looking to, this what I would call like a disease of celebrity culture, or what I would say is the Hercules myth. We keep longing, and this, I think, just dominant culture loves this, but also the church loves this. We long for Hercules. We're longing to be rescued by someone who's better and bigger and greater than us, And I was in a movie with my husband watching the Dwayne Johnson's version of Hercules, which, let's be honest, if ever there was a godlike man, it could be Dwayne Johnson. I mean, come on. And but anyway, so the idea
I've met your husband. I think that he's
well, he was more like, he's like, how do you get those traps? I mean, he was more enamored than I was, but anyway.
Fair enough.
So in the middle of the movie is basically the premise is that Hercules has made up the myth of being part God and part man so that he can basically get paid, and so can his team. And how he sort of keeps the myth alive is he goes into these battles that no one can do by themselves, but he has a secret team that enters sort of stage left, from the back. And they defeat this thing and they all exit. And Hercules emerges by himself with his sword drawn and his red cape flying, the great and mighty Hercules. And then this perpetuates this like Hercules myth. And it's working for everybody. But there's a scene in the battle where Hercules is in the front and he gets wounded. He just gets cut in his shoulder. He's still fighting, but he gets cut in the shoulder and he's bleeding. And the captain of his secret team sees it happening. So he goes all the way through the front of the battle till he gets to Hercules, and he gets off his horse and he covers Hercules' shoulder with his cape, and he whispers in his ear, "Never let them see you bleed." And in that moment in the theater, the entire screen just went black for me, and I saw Jesus bleeding everywhere. I mean, just on the cross, bleeding everywhere. And I felt the Holy Spirit say to me in that moment, you've got to choose. You can lead like Hercules. This is like the way it's going. This is where everybody wants it to go. Or you could lead like Jesus. But you cannot lead like both, because they're actually going in opposite directions. Hercules is constantly ascending, proving, pleasing. Jesus is constantly descending in self-giving love. And so you're going to have to choose. And so for me, that event, that moment I had with God in that movie theater that day challenged me, convicted me, but then really inspired me to help others to lead a different way. And so for me, like all of these projects, like the Infinitum itself, like what is the way? Not just like, I think everybody would agree, every Christian would agree, sure, it should all be about Jesus. Yes, I follow Jesus. Like, yes, Jesus is a good idea. Like Jesus should be the center. Like we sing it, but it's just like, how do we do it?
Yeah.
How do we do it? Because when we get honest with ourselves, the way that things are designed and even the way that we live our lives is a way that is Herculean. It's this, we are addicted to a Hercules myth. And without even intending to, we get there. And we find ourselves covering secret places. I mean, this is such a great exposure time of seeing how sick and lonely and disconnected leaders have been from their real self, from authentic community, from genuine accountability, from true humility.
Yeah.
And so this is this, like, how do we rediscover not just the person of Jesus, but the way of Jesus? What does that even mean as a leader? Like, how do I lead in the way of Jesus? And so this has been this great discovery. Infinitum has done this for me. Recovery in my own life has done this for me. You know, recovery journey is a lot of this for me. But also all of these things, like learning from different people, going out of my way to get in the way, taking off the cape, you know, stopping the, like, everything's fine with me, thanks very much, you know, and getting in touch with the person of Jesus and then learning to practice the way of Jesus. So that's the whole infinitum journey is really summed up in that one message, where the Holy Spirit asked me, what way do you want to lead? And if I was really super honest with you, I would say I want to lead like Hercules. It is the most familiar way, and it seems like the easiest way. But actually, my deepest, truest desire is to lead like Jesus and to be like Jesus in my life. And so to make that conscious choice every day, and then, you know, gathering some friends around to say, okay, what are the ways that you've stayed in that pocket, you know, in that deep place, and deepening your life in the way of Christ? And so all of these tools that we're sharing have come out of that place of this deep desire, and also recognition. You know, we are not naive. It is not hard to lead out of my own strength. You know, it is not hard to just do what I know to do and use my contacts and my relationships to kind of elevate myself. But how can I lead a different way, and what does that look like, and how do I practice that on a daily basis? That's a whole other, that takes a lot of intention and work. And that's really where the Beatitudes come in.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of unlearning as well. Mark, I think that you're not muted. If you could mute up, that'd be great. It takes a lot of unlearning, because we are accustomed, it's not just even in the church, maybe even especially in the church,
Yeah.
to lead in that way that projects power versus that way that bleeds. And we've had those conversations, and I think it was out of one of those conversations that the creative way down was born. And we wrestled around the, like, what should we even call it? And we said, well, it's the way of Jesus, and it's creative in that it's creating something new with Jesus, but the way is not up. You know, the way is not ascending. The way is not trying to get up to a certain place. The creative way is the way down. And so I'm just curious, if we can, just to kind of chat with some of the people who've gone through the program already, because, you know, we had that conversation and then spent the next year really formulating this thing, and then saying, just trying it out with different people. So I have a few people on, some friends on, who have walked through this program, and God bless you for having done so, because I know it's not, I'm very aware that it's not easy. I am told that I'm intense, and I don't, oh, Aries shaking her head there. Yes. Yeah. And I recognize that this is a very intense thing. And we did say at the beginning, you don't have to do it all in 3 months. You know, it's going to take some time maybe, and you take as much time as you need to take. But some people have gone through it. And so I've asked Aisha and Ari and Mark, and I don't know if your wife Olivia is there with you, Mark, but just to share a little bit on that journey that you've taken. Is that okay to do that now, Danielle?
Perfect.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, so just a couple questions. What was it? And it can be, maybe Ariel, I'll start with you. What was it that caused your church, New Joy Church, to even want to try this?
I don't remember exactly. I think we had coffee with you, Aaron, our pastoral staff. There's 5 of us, and we had coffee with you in Vancouver, and you had mentioned, I think, that it was coming. I don't know if it was ready quite then. And so I think mostly out of relationship with you and wanting to experience Jesus the way you were experiencing, because we felt like that's a whole different animal. And so it was really to that, I think that initial conversation, and I think because we follow the 24/7 Instagram page, and I think Laura, one of our pastoral staff, she said, hey, it's here, let's do it.
Right. And was it a lot of fun?
Oh man, no, it was really hard. It was like felt like my skin was being pulled off me, if that makes sense, in a good and in a difficult way. Like it's like opening up the blinds to see like what's really there. You guys left no stone unturned. So thank you, both of you, Danielle and Aaron. It was really, really intense. It was really good, but it was really intense.
I do remember talking with your team and them saying that we were, as a leadership team, you were going through it, and I just remember saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry," because I know it's not easy, and just saying, yeah, there was tears every time or something, and again, that's not bad stuff. It's actually quite good, but yeah, it can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, has that been your experience at all, Mark?
Yeah, this was, sorry, Olivia wanted to be like present, but we have a 4-month-old, so she's just being really fussy, and so she.
Understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we, yeah, it was intense. I think I was interested in this because a lot of what I've seen in sort of accountability groups and discipleship groups and stuff is like a lot of behavior modification ideas, and it's almost like figuring things out from a position of control or something. And this seemed to be just really getting deeper into what's behind a lot of these things. And sometimes, like, I don't know. Yeah, Aaron, you said you're a little bit intense. I think I'm a bit of an intense individual sometimes, and maybe people that you're leading aren't in that place, or just haven't like self-reflected in that way before, and like it's quite jarring. So yeah, I think that, sorry, I'm not even sure what question you asked me. I'm just like sharing some of my reflections, but I found in particular the first section of the Creative Way Down really helpful, especially the unit or the beatitude on blessed are those who mourn. There's a guy in our group that he's like, Mark, I'm really jealous of you. You've been able to, like, you're crying over these things, and like you're weeping, and like that seems like he was desiring that. Maybe like 3 or 4 months beyond when we finished the course, he's like, I had this breakthrough, I cracked, and like immense healing from his family and things that happened in his past, like a lot of traumatic stuff. And I think honestly, a lot of going through this course like helped him in that. And so, yeah, we didn't go through every single thing the way you outlined it, because a lot of it was like really intense, and we just sort of picked and chose what was helpful.
Yeah.
But it was quite helpful in the end. Yeah. So those are just some initial thoughts. I'm not really answering your question.
No, you know, absolutely, because it's all around, like there's a challenge in this and a comfort in it, and Jesus is both challenging and comforting, and that's actually the beautiful. But even with the blessed are those who mourn, it's mourning isn't that, you know, that's not a word that you really want to embrace terribly much, but comforting is. And, you know, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And there is a tension, there's a dialectic there of, you know, as you enter into this way of Jesus, which is challenging to every single thing in you, it also is going to meet the need of everything in you. But you have to walk that way. There isn't a shortcut to this. Aisha, I'm interested. You've been involved in prayerful communities in Toronto for decades, helping to lead things, and I'm curious how you see this, just the Beatitudes and the Creative Way Down, as something that is helpful for community formation and discipleship.
I think you hit the word, or the nail on the head with that word, discipleship. I know for us, as you said, like I've led a house of prayer for over a decade. And we loved the Beatitudes. We were like in it, and we'd listen to different teachings on it. So then when it was time for me to go through the Creative Way Down, I was like, yeah, Beatitudes, love this. No, no, no. It came from my life and I wasn't ready. But it made me realize that sometimes we can like be so excited about topics and stuff and like teachings, but we don't actually like let the word become flesh in our lives. And I think that going through the Creative Way Down, it makes you pray differently as well. Because in the prayer movement, well, most prayer movements, I would hope teach us how to pray the word, right? And we're praying the word and God's heart over certain circumstances, whether it's in the city or in the nation or in our own lives or someone who walks into the prayer room. And the Creative Way Down is like makes those scriptures become flesh so that your prayers are actually really in agreement with the heart of God over mourning and meekness. And it's like you can come into partnership with his heart. Like I think it was Mark who just talked about the section on mourning. Like I hated that section so much because I was like, I couldn't stop crying. And like as a single mom and you're doing remote learning, you're like, I don't need to be messed up all day. I'm trying to teach my kids on Zoom. Like, it was so much, but it was so good because when you go into that place of mourning, even for your own self, then you are able to have compassion for someone who walks into a prayer room who needs you to sit with them in that place of mourning, or a pastor, or even the city. When you're looking at what's going on within your city, you can go there in that place because you've allowed Jesus to go there with you. And so when it comes to discipleship, and I think discipling intercessors and praying people, or even a praying church, it's perfect discipleship material because it's causing you to become prayer and entering into that place where Jesus is, mourning, and where he's saying, blessed are those who persecute. Like you just enter into a deeper partnership with him. And prayer is not just like, yeah, I'm in agreement with that scripture, Lord, like in my mind, but it's in here. And so I think it's great. It hurts, but it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really the whole goal of all. Were you going to say something, Danielle?
I was just going to say probably what you were going to say, in that, we as leaders, even, I find that when we use the word discipleship, what people know and what they do is just like add another study. Like we just need another study. Or even people, like you said, are like all into the Beatitudes. I've memorized Matthew chapter 5, I'm all for it. But then there's such a difference between knowing and practicing, to do it. So even again, like if you're in recovery at all, like you can go to the groups, you can know the steps, but if you haven't walked through them, if you actually haven't done the work, is how they put it. If you don't do the work, then you won't be free. And I think the same is true in the way of Jesus, right? But I think, we have so intellectualized our faith, that we think it's really about belief instead of practice. And that practice becoming, that belief becoming practice is where all the transformation is. And so I think we see a lack of transformation because we see a lack of practice. And even when it is, I think, Mark, you said this, that even some forms of discipleship are all kind of like behavior modification or control based, or what I would say like fear and shame filled, where accountability is like beating each other up with a stick, looking for every speck of dust, as opposed to inward transformation that comes from changing your motive, right? Which again, all the Jesus, it's not what you're putting into your body that's the problem. It's what's coming out of your body that's the problem, right? Like it's this heart. How do we get to the heart? How do we get to our motive? How do we get to what, beyond why we're doing what we're doing? Yeah. And so for me, the Creative Way Down, even as I did it, Aaron takes full responsibility for the intensity of the Creative Way Down. Because I do all the beginner stuff, trust me. But that intensity reminded me a lot of just recovery work in so many ways, but with like a real deep Jesus center, the Spirit leading us and helping us. Yeah. And so for me and the people that I've done it with, in many ways, it did what it says it does. It took us deep. It took us deep within. It took us deeper with each other. It took us deeper into the Spirit of God, and I found it even in my own life really transformative.
Well, and it is meant to be kind of like recovery,
Mm-hmm.
because for years I've watched people in 12-step groups and NAAA, all the AAs, just doing this spiritual work and relational work and work of making amends and doing a searching inventory of their lives and just doing this kind of work, which I hadn't really seen in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And truly forgiving people and truly asking forgiveness, and then every day working on something and coming from these places of just the deepest brokenness and attachment and addiction to heroin and crystal meth and the total destruction of their outward and inward lives into a place of healing community. And I just longed for that same kind of intensity, honestly, in the church, that same kind of intention in the church. And I said, and because we're all in need of that recovery. And the reason I use the word recovery is the recovery of the image of God in us, which has been given to us and isn't gone. It's there, but just we've covered it with so many things. And so we need to learn how to receive Jesus's invitation to strip those things away. And that's painful because we've relied on those things for so long, whether it's your drug addiction or whether it's your controlling nature or whether it's a Netflix binge or whatever it happens to be, whether it's your religious addiction, whether it's your identity as a leader, all these things that we've put our trust in. And Jesus says, oh, please let that go. Open your hands because I have something so much better for you. And we might receive that as, oh, you're being so mean, Jesus. You're taking these things away. And she's like, no, I'm being really kind to you because that's never going to comfort you. It's never going to satisfy. I want you to hunger and thirst after my righteousness because that's what will satisfy, nothing else. And so it really is just this invitation Jesus is offering into his life. And I just long for us as the church to receive it.
Now, after that incredibly appetizing feedback, like it was hard and intense and like made me
brutal.
cry.
We cried.
Brutal. And so for those of you watching this, it is an intense course and it is designed. I've done it several times. Like I think I actually take a break and then do it again, sort of almost very similar to the steps where you would do it one time and then every time you do it, it almost deepens your capacity and your knowledge and who you are in your practice. So it comes with, I'm going to show you the promo in a second just so that you get a picture of what the videos are like, but it's 3 months of course material. It's a full workbook, so it's videos, it's a full workbook, which, and by full I mean like every day, morning, noon, and night. That's what we mean by intense. There's a lot. Don't worry, you don't have to do it all, but it is all there if you're wired intensely as well. And it also comes with a podcast discussion on each of the Beatitudes and teachings. And then, so anyway, all of that stuff is included in the course. And you can take it in modules. So you could just do surrender, which are the first 3 Beatitudes, or you could just do generosity, which are the next 3 Beatitudes, or you could just do mission, which are the final 3 Beatitudes. Or you could take them all, do the intensive, like it sounds like Ari and their church did. That's a lot. I have to take a break between the modules. But let me show you this promo so you can get an idea, and we'll give you the URL on where you can enter the Creative Way Down if it's useful to you. Right. Zoom. Don't we all love Zoom? Okay, here we go. This is what we mean by intense. Impossibly intense. Let's try it again. Sorry. I'm Danielle Strickland, and this is Erin White. And we are about to enter the Creative Way Down. And the Creative Way Down is a way that we can enter into the postures of infinitum. more intentionally and more resolutely, and with the hope of getting to the deeper places of the kingdom of God. So if you've been journeying with us for any time, or even if you're brand new, we daily pray a posture prayer, what we call a posture prayer, which is a posture of surrender, which goes from fighting to stillness. And we pray a generosity prayer, which goes from grasping to giving, to open-handed living. And then we pray a mission prayer, which goes from disengagement to full engagement with the needs of the world. And the question I guess we want to answer is not just our declaration of these postures, but how we live those declarations in an everyday life. So Aaron, do you want to just tell us a little bit about how this is going to work?
Yeah, well, if we want to get to those postures, I guess we assume that those postures are Jesus postures. You know, we're inspired by Jesus into those postures. So it makes most sense to try and enter Jesus's life as much as we can, to participate in what he's already doing, not just as a model, not just to try and imitate him, but actually to join him. He invites us to join in with him. So we figure the best way to do it is really to hear what he has to say, to agree to his invitation, and to join him.
And you do that by taking the pinnacle kind of moment, maybe the essence of Jesus's teaching in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5.
Yeah, chapter 5 to 7, the Sermon on the Mount, which really, in a way, sums up all the teachings of Jesus. And the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount are the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, 1 to 12, which are these 9 blessings. And we often mistake what that word blessed means. It's a really tricky word for us now, because we've really come to think of it as lucky, fortunate, or materially wealthy, or talented, or all these things. But it kind of suggests this chasm between the people who can live this life and the people who can't. And then Jesus takes this word blessed and he adopts it and puts it on the people that normally we would not think should ever be called blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit. We don't really want to be called that. Blessed are those who mourn. That doesn't feel very blessed. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the persecuted is where it ends. And so it's this weird word that Jesus used that I think should give us a hint as to what his invitation is. That he's not just inviting us into some crazy, victorious, prosperous life. It is that, but it's through the portal of his own life. He is the blessed. So when you look at blessed are the poor in spirit, there's nobody more poor of spirit than Jesus. And the blessing is that they will have the kingdom of heaven. Well, who has the kingdom of heaven more than Jesus? Blessed are those who mourn. Jesus was the man acquainted with sorrow, and they will be comforted. Well, he actually in his life is comforted. That happens. Blessed are the meek. Who's more meek than Jesus? So we enter in now to the life of Jesus through this blessedness, which is better translated really as sharing in the life of Jesus. So you can say, you can almost use that for the Beatitudes. Sharing in the life of Jesus are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Sharing in the life of Jesus are the pure in heart, for they will see God.
So the Beatitudes are this portal into the kingdom of heaven, and this creative way down into the deep of what it means to be Jesus followers in the world. So we really hope that you're going to enjoy this, and probably enjoy is the wrong word. We hope it'll be excruciating disruption to your everyday normal life, but then also that you'll be able to rest and enjoy the possibilities of what this means for your everyday ordinary life. Here's how we see this working. You need to get a friend. We call them hubs in Infinitum because these were the blessings, the Beatitudes were meant to be communal. They were meant to be done as a community, not just as an individual. And it's really hard to enter into any of those instructions and invitations by Jesus without doing it collectively. So we want to grab a friend. There's also a workbook that goes with this, a journal that you can get for this. So we want you to take the time that you need to enter into this space, to reflect, to look at the scriptures, to self-reflect, to do the work in your own life, to get to those deeper spots inside of you where the boundless salvation and love of God wants to reside.
What doesn't show up on that video is that was the hottest day in Toronto, and we spent a solid 10 hours in a loft without air conditioning. Well, we had to turn the air conditioning off, and during the course, because it's all filmed, I'm just slowly disintegrating. So it really, as difficult as it is to do the course, it was very difficult to film the course.
I
as
feel
well.
like your beard was a sponge.
It was
And
a
it just
sponge.
soaked up all the sweat. And I feel like you probably could have just like wrung it out
Yeah.
with Beatitudes sweat at the end.
Yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's what it's
Yeah.
calling us to. You mentioned, Danielle, in that video, and we've talked about this a little bit already, the infinitum postures, how this is part of infinitum. But infinitum at its core is, it's not just a course. It's, like I say, a way of living, and a very practical way of living. We entitled this Zoom cast or whatever, like doing what Jesus said, doing what Jesus actually said to do, and moving from this place of brokenness to beloved. And I wonder if you want to share just a bit about the infinitum journey, what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So infinitum was created, like I said, from this desire to be like Jesus and to be like Jesus in practice. And so infinitum is a way of life. It's an open order. I describe it like it's recovery rooms meets a monastic rhythm. It's kind of both of those things. So it has three kind of main parts and rhythms to it. So the first is a daily prayer. And I just put this up here. I shared a little bit about this in the video already, but just like so we go from, and then to. So we're going from sort of a posture of control and trying to fight for ourselves to a posture of surrender, to say, this life is mine. It is not mine. It belongs to the Lord. My life is his. And so I practice these postures every day as a way of realignment in the day, so that it actually has been amazing to me how much the posture prayer in the morning has made a difference to the way that I live my life. I know it's probably partly neurology, but also I use my body, and I think that matters a lot, because the whole point of Jesus was to embody faith, not just to talk about faith, but to embody it. So to live out. And so we use the second posture is a posture of generosity. So we do this hands clenched. This is what I call the closed-fisted posture, which is really the dominant posture of the world in our lives. And we're taught this in a consumer-based society for sure. We're taught like grab, hold, keep as much as you can for as long as you can. And then, and we move from that intentionally to an open posture of generosity, where we can both receive generously. This was a game changer for me, by the way. I always thought generosity was just giving more and and I got to the end of myself real quick, and then I would just try to give even more than that, because if it didn't hurt, it couldn't be right. And that's just a religious mindset. But to open our hands to live generously is to generously receive from a generous God, right? And then to generously give what we freely received. That's literally how Jesus sent out the disciples. Freely you've received, freely give. And so now that practice has been a game changer for me, because when I find myself short of giving, when I find myself tempted to close up, maybe it's in an area of patience, I'll be like, whoa, I think I need to receive some patience. And I ask for what I need so that I can actually be free with what it is that I give. And it's just really changed a lot in the way that I practice my faith. And then missional, again, disengaged, or not my problem, or even, this is a big one, spectating and critiquing. These are like dominant postures in my life. I spectate and I critique. And whenever I find myself doing that, I change my posture and I open it. And I say, like, I am open to others. Like, my life needs to open itself to deep, deep need on the farthest side of the world, but also those closest to me. I want to be an open and engaged person. So for me, every time I do this, I imagine the prodigal father opening his arms and enfolding his son even before his son could spit out his apology, right? This, like, you're welcome here. I want you here. And so that's the way that I try to posture my life. So those are the three postures. A daily prayer is how we practice it. Oops, sorry, this is a prayer guide. A daily prayer is how we posture it. And then a weekly connect with other human beings who are also trying to practice the postures. And this doesn't have to be like super rigorous, like some accountability groups are. It really is just mutual connection. We're doing this together. We're not isolated and alone. For me, this often happens over FaceTime, even before COVID, because the people that I've been journeying with, I move around a fair bit. So oftentimes the easiest way to do it is just by FaceTime, or honestly, even sometimes Marco Polo. In whatever way we need to do this to connect meaningfully. And what we do in that setting is we use these questions. So instead of content, if you want lots of content, the Creative Way Down course is the way to go deeper. But if you just want to stimulate these discussions, what we found is instead of giving you like a list of things, did you read your Bible today? You know, like and again, back to this behavior modification idea, like, did you do this? Do you look at porn? Do you not look at porn? You know, like all of these things that we add to these lists of trying to behave better. We thought that's not actually that helpful. We actually want to talk about the motive. We want to talk a little deeper. We want to go to heart. And so we use questions as the main curriculum, questions to ask one another. So, you know, who are you using love as a verb and how as a noun? Who is one of the first people to love you sacrificially? And how did they do that? What current situation around the world is breaking your heart? Now, you wouldn't go through all these questions when you meet in your hub, what we call a hub or a small group, but you would go through a few, or maybe there's one that you've looked over during the week that's kind of sticking with you that you want to talk about and pray through. And then we just have so many questions, and people send in questions that practice this, or there's new questions that are designed just to keep things fresh, but there's so many of them about surrender. Well, here's one. What's 2020 taught you about your need for control versus surrender? That'll keep you going for an hour. And then some things around generosity. And every time I practice this, and then others, you know, is there somewhere someone God has told you to go to, but you've resisted? You know, what a better conversation that is with another Jesus follower. And then we just simply pray for one another. And then what we do is part of the rhythm is every month we try to challenge ourselves to do something different. So we suggest some challenges, but often people have their own challenges that just come naturally out of their walk with Jesus. So for example, one time I was struggling with generosity, just trying to practice generosity. And the challenge our hub came up with was to give generously to a group that had nothing to do with us, and that even we didn't agree with. Like, give generously to like an enemy. I wouldn't say enemy is too strong of a word, but to somebody that would not, one, it would not benefit us in any way, and two, we don't even really agree with these people. And just the act of being generous in a way that was not going to benefit me and not going to help a cause that I love was a good exercise in generosity. You know, just was, and so like things like that, or it could even literally be baking muffins and going to visit your neighbor in physical space and saying like, I see you and I care about you and I'm here for you. So all the challenges are different, and but the idea is that this is a practice, and it's living, and it's alive, and it's done with other people, and it's rooted in real life, things that you can do and practice for real life.
Well, and that's so important, especially when we're talking about the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, because even with that, even with Jesus's primary teaching there in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, this is how I want you to live. The number of times I've encountered people to go, well, yeah, but he didn't mean that.
Right.
You know, he more, this is just showing how far off the mark we just are. And Jesus does it so we don't have to. And that line, Jesus does it so we don't have to, there is something Jesus does that we can't do.
Yes.
But Jesus's teaching is inviting us into something that in him we're called to do.
Yeah.
It's a way that we are called to live. And that's why I love Infinitum. It's not just here's some more information. It's let's start practicing it. Let's start doing it. And that's actually what drew me first to Mark Scandret's book. Was it the Jesus Dojo or something along those lines, where it's just come and try things, practice stuff, you know, like Jesus said, try it, let's try it. And in the trying, and often in the failing, you're going to learn. You know, I've done practicing the way of Jesus. Yeah. The joining Jesus in the Jesus Dojo is the subtitle, I'm pretty sure. But it's just like, yeah, go and join Jesus. And he's really, really good at this. In fact, he's perfect at this. Now, and he says, come in.
Yeah, this is one of the interesting things about this experiment. So there's probably about, I don't know, maybe 15,000 people around the world that kind of practice some form of infinitum. So that's kind of neat. In a bunch of different countries, it's kind of fun, but it's not massive. And one of the greatest feedbacks we get is people's inability to get together to do this. Like, the hub is always the hindrance, which I think is fascinating, because the connection, that's the whole point. Like, to be connected with Christ, the connection's the point. That's where all of the beautiful things, that the transformation comes. So I think that's really interesting for those of you who might want to start it, because sometimes it's so simple, it's almost hard. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so simple, but it's so counter to practice a way instead of to study a thing. Is so different than what we know how to do that it can be overwhelming and difficult for people. So we recently launched a thing called the Infinitum 30-day challenge. And the 30-day challenge is a thing you can sign up for. It's completely free. You sign up with your group, you get daily emails that give you instructions on what to do that day. So you do the daily prayer. There's a YouVersion Bible reading app that goes through some Bible passages on all the postures. There's a video once a week that you can watch together. And it just becomes a way to help you practice the way of infinitum. And at the end of 30 days, then you can keep going if you want yourself. You don't need any, you don't need any help. This thing kind of does itself if you'll practice the way of Christ. It kind of forms you and helps you to discover these rhythms and practices that you can practice. So Infinitum Challenge, 30-day challenge. If you go to infinitumlife.com, you can sign on to the challenge for free. And it's just a way, again, of entering in and trying to practice and taking this thing out of our heads and into our lives and daily practices. And hopefully that's a great tool for you to rediscover what life's like with Jesus at the center.
I put it's infinitumlife.com. Is that where people can get? Yeah. So I put that in there. Aisha asked, can you go through it with children? 100%.
Yeah,
I think it's
fantastic.
really good. And I mean,
we actually have a kid's version of the posture prayer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll make sure that's up there. I use it with my kids all the time. As a matter of fact, I pray the posture prayer with my kids before they go to school.
Yeah.
And so they surrender their life to God that day. So this isn't about them. It's about what God is inviting them to do. They freely receive what they need, and freely then offer it to other kids. And then they open their lives up to see. And like even how they pray it is beautiful. Kids who are lonely, kids who don't have any friends, and they're on mission when they go. It's been beautiful practice to do with my kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just last week was teaching a university course, and at the beginning of every class, we'd all stand and we'd do this posture prayer. Mm-hmm. And we know our friend Phil Wall, who's involved in Infinitum. He works with high level business people, and he says they don't have time. They probably don't have time to do the creative way down. Their lives are pretty like 20 hours a day. We're doing stuff, but he's like, what if for the first 30 seconds of your day, you stopped and you prayed in these ways, and that then formed the rest of your day. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's a beautiful enactment of the stuff that we're talking about and writing about, and that's important too. Like the teaching is important, but if it's just teaching stuff and not doing, we have a friend, Michael Collins, who says if you know 5 things and you're only doing 3 things, you know too much. And I like that. It's overstated, but I like it. It's like get doing the things that you know.
He also has some beautiful transformation stories. So there's a guy, Mike Horn, he's in charge of an advertising company, and he founded it. It's very prominent, and he goes into work before, it's not a Christian company, it's just a company doing beautiful things in the world. And he goes into work before anybody else gets there as the founder, and he stands in the middle of the warehouse and he just says, I surrender this warehouse to the Lordship of Christ. And he says, freely we've received jobs and, like all these things, and freely we will give it. And then we open ourselves up. This company exists to be there for the deepest needs of the world. And he said just the transformation in how he thinks about his business and how he sees things happening, like it's just been so transformative for the way that he runs his company, which of course none of us really saw coming. Like we were just sort of trying ourselves to be leaders who look like Jesus. But I mean, like how cool is that about the way of Jesus, right? Like this is actually something that could transform you and then transform your employees and the way you treat them and transform. And then he has another guy he coaches who was, he was the barrister. He was the guy that was in charge of all the human trafficking cases in the UK. And he said he walked into his office one day to connect with him. And under the glass of his desk was the posture prayer. And he said to him, whoa, look at that. Like there's the Infinitum posture prayer. And he said, yeah. And he goes, well, what are you doing with it there? And he says, oh, every time I get a new case, I open the file and I put my hands on it and I say, I surrender this case to the Lordship of Christ. I freely receive everything I need to judge this fairly and justly. And I'm going to give justice as freely as I've received it. And then I am open to the needs of others and pray with. And he says, I pray this over every case that I'm in charge of. And again, like Phil was just like bawling because he's like a baller now because he's old and soft. But He used to pretend he was hard, but he's old and soft. Come on. And anyway, it's just I think that kind of thing, like kids going to school, like, and it's not about the formula. It's just about the posture. And that's been a big thing for me, is like moving from formula. Like I've been, in an external coded religious kind of upbringing. So I know I can check all those boxes off, and still my heart could be far from God.
Yep.
And still my heart can be far from God, and still my practice doesn't line up with what I say I believe. So for me, it's been this furious attempt, literally like a furious attempt to get to the way of Jesus, because I don't want to just slip into these religious routines and pretend I'm something I'm not, and not have the kind of self-giving love that could actually change the world with Jesus, and with his people. So it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing. Aaron, please tell us about your book before we run out of time.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to, as I was thinking there, like, this is top level business folk and legal folk, that, like, when I say top level, I mean, like, in the world's eyes, the most elite of the elite.
Yeah.
And kids going to school, and my friends coming off of heroin and crystal meth. And it's the same words of Jesus, which are liberating and delivering and challenging and comforting to everyone, to all of them. And that actually is the beauty of Jesus, that it's not, this is not just for church folk. Mm-hmm. This is something that is across the board that Jesus is inviting people into. And we just super have to get our head around that.
Oh,
so
a surprise, just a second. So there was a surprise in the Infinitum Journey. So we had a bunch of younger folks who were practicing Infinitum, loving sort of doing this. And they asked if they could invite their non-Christian friends to practice Infinitum with them. And we were like, what? Like, I mean, we just had not. But then as we thought about it, even just for a couple of minutes, we were like, duh, that's like literally what Jesus did, right? Like, come follow me and we'll figure this out together, right? And again, it occurred to me again that we even make conversion about belief instead of faith. Yeah. About like what we think instead of what we practice. And so several of these people have invited their friends to practice the way of Jesus for 30 days and then have a conversation about whether it made any difference and what it was like, and if they would like to do this for the rest of their life. And I just thought, whoa, this is such a cool way of doing evangelism, and actually such a biblical way of doing evangelism. So that's just the book. Go.
Well, but just even before I get there, people have done the creative way down who weren't believers as well. They invited their friends who were not believers. And I just think that's like insane. But they welcome them into this thing, and they're like, yeah, I'm just examining my life in the light of Jesus, and not even sure that he is who he says he is at all. But what if he was? They just start with that question. And really a lot of this came from the last 25 years of my life working with people in recovery, some of whom had faith commitments, some who didn't. But we're actually just examining their life in the light of the 12 steps, which are so connected to the Beatitudes and the teachings of Jesus. It's not even funny. And so I started really realizing that connection, and it was asked by Baker Academic if I would write a book about this, about how to pastor people through recovery. And I said, well, I could write that, but I don't really want to write that. What I really want to do is talk about, what does Jesus invite all of us into a way of living, which is what I describe as a beatitude community, which is a whole new way of life, not just as individuals, but together, in kind of opposition in a way to the displacement of the world, to the terrible brokenness of the world, which causes us pain. And the pain then leads us to these places of addiction and attachment. And this is not just about drugs and alcohol. This is about all the things that we run to. And all addiction and attachment is ultimately about unprocessed pain and trying to find solutions to that pain. And heroin is a pretty decent solution to certain types of pain. It's not good, but it kind of works. If it didn't work, people wouldn't use it. And so are all the other things that we get attached to. So I decided to write a book really just about what is Jesus inviting us into in terms of beatitude community. And his invitation happens to meet the deep pain of the world. And it offers the freedom and deliverance that we're all longing for. And so he says, come into my life. And that was the huge game changer for me, was going, the Beatitudes are not, and the whole Sermon on the Mount is not just Jesus saying, try and live up to this standard. It's come and join me, come and share my relationships with the Father and with the Spirit in me, and share my relationships with the world. And if that seems really kind of out there for you, well, do read the book, because it's just deeply biblical. I mean, Paul uses the phrase "in Christ" more than 50 times in his letters. He says, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." And in John 17, Jesus says to the Father, says, "I want them to be one as I'm in you, Father, and you're in me, and they're in me, and I'm in them, and they're to be one together." So it's this whole new form of beatitude community, which changes us and is the very thing that can change the world, as we learn to be poor in spirit together, as we learn to mourn together, as we learn what meekness means together, as we learn what it means to be pure in heart and hunger and thirst after righteousness, as we learn how to engage in mercy, as we learn to persevere in the midst of persecution and even to rejoice. How do we do that together? So I'm sorry that my friend Marty couldn't be here. I've had two friends who were going to come and talk about the book. My friend Vince, but I met them both in recovery. My friend Vince is now a counselor for others in recovery, and he's quoted in the book. And my friend Marty's probably read the book probably more than me, and he hands it out to everybody. And I met him. He was getting on an elevator in the downtown east side in a slum hotel, and he met one of our students, and they just got to talking, and he just said, "Well, I'm ready to go kill myself right now," because his life had just fallen apart so much. And he said, "Well, how about instead of that tonight, why don't you come to our little cafe, and then why don't you come into our community, and then why don't we start exploring the life of Jesus together?" And so he's now in this just really beautiful place as well, and sharing that with others. So this is all about the things that I've learned from my friends in recovery, and the stuff that I've learned from many of the early church mothers and fathers who are writing about this stuff. And I like to say, the book is trying to get people to listen to Gregory of Nyssa and my friend Rob, who's been a crack addict for a lot of years. And because they're saying often very, very similar things. And I really want to get that out there. So that's the book. You can order it from this place here. Please don't order it from Amazon, because we don't want to add any more fuel to his rocket. And Amazon happens to be, I think, a kind of giant addiction in our world today. So there's better places to do it. And also, incidentally, authors don't make any money off of Amazon at all. So don't be fooled.
So the best way to get it is here, Baker Publishing Group?
Baker Publishing Group, or you can go to jacobswell.ca and you can order it from there as well, or order it to your library, or if you see it on a bookshelf, just take it. Those are all my preferences to ordering it over Amazon.
Okay. Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Aaron. The book is fantastic and it is beautiful. And just for the record, everyone, it is very deep, but it's super readable and accessible to everybody. So I know it was written for pastors and leaders, and Aaron has that capacity to go really, really deep, but also to really be accessible to the average person. So it's not hard to read, but it is deep and beautiful. I absolutely loved it, Aaron. It's such a gift.
It's not as funny as I would want it to be, but there is some funny stuff in there. I did at one point go, "Oh, I need to go some more funny."
Called Two Wise Fools. So go listen to his podcast if you want funny Aaron.
Yeah.
He's funny. And then if you want dancing Aaron, you have to probably go in person.
Yeah. My son has suggested that I should go on TikTok.
Yes.
And he said, "Dad, you have no idea how many people would actually follow you and watch what you did on TikTok." And
yeah,
I mean, there's a thought, but it's probably not going to happen.
Speaking of crack, TikTok is the new crack, but
yeah.
But I would say 2 votes for TikTok and Aaron account, please. I'm going to start praying now.
We shall see.
All right. Well,
thanks everybody for joining us. And those I know who are following on Facebook Live, and those who are going to be watching this later. The Milk Crate Challenge, Carmen says, "No, I've done that. It's so bad." If you look at, this is totally not to do with the Beatitudes, but if you look up any kind of YouTube Milk Crate Challenge fails, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It is unbelievably painful to watch, but funny. Yeah, but thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, you probably on Facebook, you can throw stuff Danielle's way, or, on my page or Instagram or any of those things. But, we really less we're not as interested in just getting the programs out there. We just want Jesus's name glorified. We want people to really meet him because he is just that good. And he gives us this curriculum, the Beatitude and the Sermon on the Mount beyond it. And we just long for the church to be known as a Beatitude people. And imagine what would happen if that was the case, if that was our reputation, was a Beatitude people.
It's
Change
also,
everything.
it's time. So if you're watching this and your faith in what you knew before is being deconstructed or apocalyptically exposed, this is the perfect time.
Yeah.
Not just to abandon all hope here, but to find the true source of hope and faith and love, who is the person of Jesus. So
Amen.
don't give up, discover Jesus. And we're telling you that authentic, beautiful practice of the way of Christ is transformative and can transform you. And then you can become a transforming part of his presence in the earth. That's what we long for. And thanks for tuning in with us. Thanks, guys, for being here in person and for your feedback. We sure appreciate you. God bless.
God bless.